Well, this is going to be our video for our FBA and BIP video presentation and project. I'm not going to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, because we don't know what time you're watching this video. So, of course, I'm going to say good hello. Good hello. So let's start off with a little bit of background information. So when we say FBA, what we're talking about there is a functional behavior assessment. And a functional behavior assessment is not something we do for every single student. This is something that we do for those students who have chronic and ongoing behavior issues to the point where their behavior is impeding their progress or the progress of those around them. So kind of like when we think about RTI. So when we think about response to intervention, we may give every single student a universal screener, which is why it's called universal, because it's given to everybody. But for an FBA, it's what we call an individually administered assessment. And because it's an individually administered assessment in the real world, we would need to have parent permission. So when you do the state test, like in Tennessee, we use the TCAP. In Kentucky, I believe you use the KPREP. And Virginia, they use the SOL. So every state has their state assessments. For state assessments, you do not have to have parent permission because they're given to every child, say, for example, in a specific grade level. But for an FBA, a functional behavior assessment, that is, like I said, an individually administered assessment, and we would need parent permission in order to give one. You might say, why do we give one, or when do we give an FBA? Well, like I said, IDEA, Individuals with Disability Education Act, requires that before we're going to make a change in placement, educational placement for a child based on their behavior, or if we're looking at suspending a child beyond 10 days, or when the child displays a pattern of behavior that, like I said, interferes with their learning or the learning of others, we are required professionally, ethically, responsibly to do something about it. So we have to come up with a plan. And you might be thinking, so does every child that have a behavior plan, do they have an FBA? Not necessarily. You can have a behavior contract. You can have a positive behavior support plan. You can have other intervention plans in place without having an FBA. The FBA, though, gives us the ability to look at the function behind the behavior. And the reason that's important is because if I only deal with the outward displays of the behavior or the way that the behavior is manifesting, what I see, then I'm not getting to the root of the reason behind the behavior. So yes, I can give the child, I can come up with a behavior contract, I can give the child consequences, I can do all those other things. But if we never figure out the why behind the behavior, we don't figure out the function that the behavior is serving for the child, any changes in behavior that we see are likely to be short-lived. But when we can look at the function of behavior, and by that what I mean is, what purpose is that behavior serving for me? What function is that serving for me? So for example, if I have a need, not just a want, but a true need for attention, and so I'm acting out in class, making inappropriate comments, doing all these different things in class in order to get the attention that I need, then the function of behavior is to gain attention. So if then you as a teacher can come up with a more appropriate way for me to be able to seek and gain that attention that I so desperately need, then I no longer have a reason to be acting out inappropriately in class. So if I can get the attention in a positive way, great. But if I don't know a positive way to get it, I'm going to get that attention any way I can. So functional behavior assessment allows us to be able to look at the underlying reason behind the behavior, the function that the behavior is serving for the individual. And by using a functional behavior assessment, then we can use that to drive our BIP, or our behavior intervention plan, with an appropriate replacement behavior. And that will more likely, not 100%, but that will more likely result in longer term changes in behavior. Because for the most part, we act the way that we do for a reason. And so if I'm acting inappropriately, it's for a reason. And if I can have that need met in a more appropriate way, I don't necessarily have a reason to act out inappropriately anymore. So, all right, so that's the reason behind the FBA and BIP. So right now, we are hopefully coming out of a pandemic at the time that I'm making this video, which is during summer 1 of 2021. We are hopefully coming out of a pandemic. In a typical non-pandemic semester, I would have my students go into a classroom, sit down with a teacher, discuss a child who's struggling with behavior, talk about things that have been tried for that child, things that have worked, things that haven't worked, and then they would come back into the classroom a second time, observe the student, and then they would work on their draft FBA, their draft BIP, and then they'd come back and they would share those results and their suggestions with that teacher. Even in that situation, we're not doing a full-blown FBA and BIP. As I said before, a real FBA in the real world, remember what we're doing is for educational purposes, for our educational purposes, not for the educational purposes of our kids, but for our educational purposes. So my goal, as I told you guys on the very first night of class, we are together for only 8 weeks. You are not going to be a behavior specialist, a behavior therapist, a behavior consultant, a behavior guru by the end of our 8 weeks together when we're spending an hour and a half together at a time. The goal is for you to have a strong foundational understanding of how to respond to inappropriate student behavior, how to hopefully prevent it on the front end, be proactive, and if not able to prevent it, then how to respond to it appropriately. So for our purposes, we're doing what we would call a pseudo FBA, which means that we wouldn't be getting parent permission. You would not be sharing with me the child's real name in a normal semester. You would not be able to conduct a parent interview. You would not be conducting the student interview. You would not be administering behavior rating scales. You would not have the authority to be able to go through the child's discipline files, historic academic files, and all of those other pieces that go into a functional behavior assessment. You would be doing just the basics, just the part of the looking at the behavior, getting input from that one current teacher, not necessarily all of the child's teachers, not the child's previous teachers, and basing your FBA on that information. However, in a pandemic such as we're in right now, like I said, coming out of it, thankfully, but still in a pandemic situation where our accessibility to schools is not necessarily a certainty from day to day. We may be able to get into schools to conduct observation and field hours one day, and the very next day we're not allowed to again. So considering the fact that this is an online class and we could have students from anywhere in the world, I made the choice to make sure that we could sustain what we started at the beginning of our semester. So that's why we're using alternate field hours, and that's why we're using an alternate assignment for our FBA BIP. So instead of going into a classroom and meeting with a teacher and having that conversation with them one-on-one, and then coming back into the classroom for a second time and observing a child, and then coming back into the classroom for a third time and having a second debriefing with that teacher, you will instead be using a case study. So in the FBA folder that I provided for you, where it says functional behavior assessment information, look inside. In that folder, you will see, and it's a little bit different because I've got the way I've got it minimized, so that way you can see both my presentation as well as the information I'm presenting to you. In that folder, you'll see a link for case study info for Winston. So I have given you a fictional student. He happens to be a first grade boy, happens to be a twin. His brother is educated in a separate classroom than he is in. The boys both live with their grandmother, and they see their mother occasionally. No mention of a father. It doesn't mean he's not there, just no mention of a father. So instead of you going in and meeting with a teacher to discuss an actual student and then coming back into the classroom and observing the student and then meeting with the teacher again, which would require being able to go into that same classroom 3 times. And like I said, we never know if that's going to be able to happen right now. Instead, you'll be using this case study information that I've provided for you. With this case study, you have the latitude to be able to supplement it with other information that you feel that you would want to supplement it with. It's not all inclusive. It doesn't have everything. It has minimal information, enough that you could complete the assignment. But if you want to supplement it with additional information, you can. You just cannot delete what's there. But if you want to add to it, that's perfectly fine. So you will go through this case study that I've provided for you about Winston J. Freeman. And there's a set of data collected from an observation here, and then a little bit of data analysis provided there for you as well. So you will read through that case study, which is step 1. So once you've read through that case study, you will then look at the, I've provided for you FBA rubric. It's also, well, I use the template as your rubric, so that way you'd be able to see exactly how things line up. And that's going to be too large. Let me fix that. So on the rubric, and you'll find that in the rubrics folder. So in that rubrics folder, and you'll also find it here in that same folder, the FBA. So the blank forms are here for you where it says FBA BIP forms from Kentucky. It says these are the forms you should use. Kind of straightforward. This link to the video will be right here. I will add in there modified summer 2021, so that way I can keep track of when I've changed it. But that's what it will show right there for you, this video. The forms to use, and then the rubric for the FBA, the rubric for the BIP, and the rubric for the video presentation. All right, all of that will be right there for you in that folder. Anything you see in the FBA rubric or template, so the template and the forms are identical. The only difference is that on the rubric, they're highlighted and numbered. So anything that is numbered, such as this, number 1, number 2, number 3, and over here under grade, it says number 4, and then number 5. If it says optional, if you can include that. You don't have to. You can create it if you don't, if it's not provided for you. But you're going to read through. Every page is going to ask for the student's name. Yes, it's redundant, but yes, it's necessary. Why? Well, think about the fact that if you've got a stack of papers that are printed out, and yes, normally we staple papers together, but they don't always get stapled. And if you're printing multiple FBAs at one time on a printer, and sometimes the pages they feed incorrectly and they get shuffled, or you drop a stack of papers, whatever the case might be, or they're put into a folder and they're not stapled. You want to make sure that you can keep track of whose forms are, whose page 2 this is, and whose page 4 this is, and whose page 5 this is. So yes, the name goes at the top of every single page. And yes, you get credit for doing it. Easy points, easy points. So you're going to include the child's name, date of birth. That information is provided for you on the case study. I did not give his year of birth, basically because, like I said, hopefully we're on the coming out of the pandemic, but I'm not sure. So I did say his birthday is October 8th. Typically in first grade, children are 6, 7 years old. So you can do the math and subtract it. But in the event that I need to prolong how long we're doing this alternate assignment, I didn't want to give a date for birth that then made this child a 10-year-old, hopefully not that long, but make this child a 10-year-old in the first grade. So that is the reason why I did not include the year, but I did include October 8th. October 8th, and then you can do the math and calculate the year. Grade, I already told you first grade. I did provide a school name for you. The person developing the FBA, in a real world situation, yes, I'm going to say that so many times you guys are going to get tired of hearing in the real world in this video, so I apologize in advance. But in the real world, you should never be creating an FBA in isolation. So you might be saying, so why are we doing it for this assignment? Well, like I said, it's an online class and we are learning from anywhere across the world. And sometimes being able to coordinate things to be able to do an online team or group or cooperative assignment is not always the easiest. And other than that, also, like I said, it's a pseudo FBA. It's not a full blown. In the real world, you should be doing this as part of an IEP team. Like I said, you would be working with the child's parent. You would interview the parent. You would interview the student. You would get input from the child's current teachers. You would get input, if you could, from previous teachers. You would talk to, hopefully, maybe the school counselor, maybe a behavior consultant if your district has one, things of that nature. So persons developing the FBA should be multiple people in a typical situation. For our purposes, for our class, like I said, for our learning purposes, you're going to be listing your name there on number 5. What does the student like to do or enjoy? What does the student like to talk about, read about, draw about? That information is provided for you in the case study. What are the students' learning preferences? So all of this information, like I said, is there. If you feel that you want to supplement with additional information, as I said before, feel free to do so. Just don't omit information that is provided for you. Like I said before, the next page, you're going to include the child's name again. It says here, complete the section for each target behavior. So sometimes when we're doing an FBA in the real world, we have a child who has multiple behavior issues. Say, for example, Charlie Brown might be sleeping in class. He might be making inappropriate noises when he's not asleep. Or he could be physically aggressive towards others. So if I have a plethora of behavioral issues, I'm going to focus on the ones that's the most important. So although sleeping in class is not an ideal situation, it doesn't disrupt anybody else. Being disruptive, making noises, that is disruptive. But the most important is if he's physically hurting himself or hurting somebody else. Safety is always our number one priority. So if there's multiple behavior issues, I might decide to focus on one or two. I would never focus on more than maybe 3 at a time at the most, but I would probably focus on maybe 1 or 2. And also, once we've gone through and looked at the behavior, if we've determined that the function of the behavior of 2 behaviors is the same function, and then the function of the 3rd or 4th behaviors are a different function, I'm probably going to focus on the ones that have the same function of the behavior first, because that way I can work on them together with the same replacement behavior. So, and with the same focus for my reinforcement. So if I'm doing something in order to gain attention, my focus then is going to be able to find a more appropriate way for the child to get attention. If I am doing something because I want to gain a tangible, then I'm going to be focusing on what I can do for that child to be able to gain that tangible, maybe working on if-thens. If you do X, Y, Z, then you can use, you can have the activity that you're looking for 5 minutes of preferred choice time, something of that nature. But you definitely want to describe what that inappropriate behavior is, not just say Winston is aggressive or Charlie Brown is aggressive. We need to make sure that we describe what that looks like, sounds like for that child. Aggressive behavior for one child can be completely different from aggressive behavior for a different child. So we need to make sure that we're clear about that. Just like if we're thinking about off-task behavior. So off-task for Charlie Brown could be sleeping. Off-task for Winston could be up roaming around the classroom. Off-task for Schroeder could be sitting in his desk, self-stimming and humming and flapping his hands or twirling his hair or picking at scabs. I mean, we don't know what it could be for that child, so we need to make sure that we describe what that behavior looks like for that individual. The next part that you'll be completing is 15, 16, and 17. So it says indirect observation. So we're going to say that for the purposes of our assignment that we would have click probably other and listed classroom observation that we observed the child. Like I said, not necessarily that we did. It could have also been that we had interviewed or spoke with the teacher or whatever information you want to list there as far as indirect assessment, but you need to give me something there. Direct assessment, that would be our observation data, and that's provided for you in the case study. So you can list that there. As far as archival record review, like I said, in the real situation, we would have been able to go back and look at discipline referrals. We would have been able to look at the data for the child as far as what they had done before, behavior rating scales, anything of that nature. So you can list anything there that you choose. Student name again on the next page. You'll notice there where it says skip this section. So when we're thinking about an FBA, like I said, we're not doing a full-blown FBA. We're doing a pseudo FBA. We don't have ongoing data. We don't have a whole lot of information about the previous interventions that have been tried. It did mention in the case study that they have used different token economy systems, that they use his favorite candy, things of that nature. But I'm allowing you to skip this section. So make sure that you're looking at the rubric to see what sections you can skip and which sections you need to respond to. So for this next one here where it says section C, when and where does the target behavior of concern most often occur? So that information is provided there for you in the case study. When and where does the target behavior of concern rarely or never occur? In what types of activities does the behavior most often occur? And in what types of activities does the target behavior rarely or never occur? Again, you can pull that information from the case study. On the next page, again, the child's name. I'm allowing you to skip 5, 6, and 7 under there. The next section says, in order to arrive at a reliable definition that can be observed and measured, answer the relevant questions. So for number 24, you'll notice, though, that there's not a specific one that's listed here. So when we talked about our data before, when we talked about data collection back in chapter 4, we talked about duration, we talked about latency, we talked about frequency. So the question here is, which one most applies to this case study that I've provided for you? If you go back and look at what was provided, I think I even said in there, duration of off-task behavior. Just a hint. So you're not necessarily required to fill in all of those. Only certain types of behavior recording work for certain types of behavior. So if it's not an issue of latency, we wouldn't include latency. So I would probably put NA under latency. I would describe the data here using previously collected data, state how many seconds, minutes, or periods the behavior lasts, be specific. So from the case study, use that information to complete under here where it says duration. I would put NA, like I said, for latency. I would also put NA for frequency. Intensity, go ahead and answer those questions that are there. Consequences, you can answer that information based on what was in the case study. And if you need to, you can add supplemental information there as well. When I say supplemental information, just anything that you feel, like I said, case study, I provided you only 2 pages, one of which is data. So if you want to, like I said, supplement that with what you may have seen had you actually been in the classroom, that would be fine. That is perfectly fine. Nearing the end of our FBA here, again, first the child's name at the top of the page. Target behavior. Make sure, if you notice here, there's 3 different points that are listed there, 29, 30, and 31. Make sure that you are answering the question about what you believe to be the child's function of behavior, your hypothesis. Remember, for the purposes of our class, we've talked about the idea or the actuality that there are other strains of thought or other schools of thought. But for our purposes, we're looking through the singular lens of ABA, applied behavior analysis. And we talked, when we talked about chapter 7, we talked about the fact that for ABA, we're looking at either a desire to gain attention, to gain a tangible, which could also be event, or to gain sensory stimulation. If I slow down, I can speak more clearly. Or we could be looking to escape attention or interactions. We could be looking to escape activity or a task. We could be looking to escape sensory stimulation. So when we talk about Winston Friedman, whose disability is hearing impaired, also diagnosed with autism and ADHD, ADHD is not the function of his behavior. ADHD may contribute to the reason he's behaving the way that he is. ADHD may contribute to the behaviors that are seen, but it's not the function of behavior. It's not the function. So we are looking at what you believe to be the function of behavior. So you're going to describe during or when Winston blank, 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 the student blank, 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 to, and you're either going to say access or gain, whatever, or either to escape or avoid, whatever. So you're going to provide that information there. Again, like I said, for our purposes, we're only focusing on the one behavior, the one target behavior concern. You can leave the concern for 2 and 3 blank. Do the results of the FBA indicate a need for a behavior intervention plan? Well, considering that's the second part of our assignment, we're going to say yes. So under number 32, please check yes. And because we do not have one to be able to refer back to, please make sure that you're going to say that a new IEP plan or new behavior plan will be developed. That's where number 33 is there, and it's highlighted. So you're going to click yes there, or click or check mark yes. So that's our FBA. So your FBA, again, functional behavior assessment. There are 33 answers that are highlighted and numbered for you on the rubric. Each one will be worth 1.5 points, which I believe comes out to 49.5. So you get 0.5 automatically. So you get 0.5 automatically. You don't have to worry about that part. All right. The next part of our assignment is the BIP. So for the BIP, much of the information, and BIP stands for Behavior Intervention Plan. Like I said, you may also hear these things called just as like a behavior plan, a positive behavior intervention plan, positive behavior intervention support plan. But typically when we're talking about an FBA, we usually call it a BIP. Usually those two terms go without all the other different variations. It usually goes just as a BIP and an FBA not BIP. So the information here at the top is regurgitated from the other plan. Much of the information here is repeated from the FBA. And you might say, what's the point? Well, one of the reasons I would say that the information is repeated is typically when we develop a behavior intervention plan for a child. We've conducted the assessment, and then we develop a plan. The plan is the part that's shared with the child's other teachers. So we don't necessarily share the assessment with them. The assessment is absolutely discussed in the IEP meeting and kept in the child's file and is referred back to, by the special education teacher and in IEP meetings. But what is typically distributed to the child's other teachers is the behavior intervention plan. Also distributed, hopefully, to school administration. So that way, if the child gets into trouble and they're going to be working with the child as far as consequences, they're aware of the child's plan as well. Sometimes there's things in it that are specific that administration would need to know, such as the child, do not, pursue the child when he is, sitting in the hallway. Allow him the opportunity to calm down, or the child should be afforded the opportunity to be able to go. We call it a chill pass. Some people call it a self timeout. But a child may be given the opportunity to, if they show the teacher their chill pass, they're allowed to walk out of class and go to the guidance office to avoid doing something in class they should not do. So admin would need to know and be aware that Charlie Brown has a behavior plan that allows for that. So that way, if they see Charlie Brown walking out of class, slammed the door, and made a beeline for the guidance office, they're probably just going to hang back some and just watch to make sure, yes, he's going where he needs to go, and that there's no, inappropriate interactions with anybody or anything between point A and point B. But they don't necessarily need to pursue him. They don't necessarily need to stop him. They don't necessarily need to stop him and ask him what's going on. He needs to have the opportunity to be able to de-escalate. And so if that's in his plan, administration would need to know that. So the behavior intervention plan, like I said, is a part that is typically shared. And so that's why a lot of the information is repeated from the FBA onto the behavior intervention plan. Target behavior concern, again, this information comes from the other part. We're talking about where does the behavior usually occur? What does that behavior look like? Under what typical circumstances do we usually see that behavior? So all that information is there. Number 23. What is the function of the target behavior? So this again comes from that last summary page on the FBA. What do we believe to be the function of the behavior? And that is stated here on the behavior intervention plan. Replacement behavior. So this is what I alluded to earlier. This is key. So in order to hopefully bring about long-lasting change in behavior, we need to come up with a more appropriate way for the child to get their needs met. So like I said, if I'm interrupting in class or disrupting in class, making inappropriate noises, bodily noises, inappropriate comments, things of that nature, and I'm doing it for the sole purpose to get attention, whether it be from my peers or whether it be from the teacher, but I'm doing it for the purpose of getting attention, to gain that attention, then my replacement behavior needs to focus on a more appropriate way for me to be able to get attention. So then that way I no longer have that need to do that. You might say, well, that sounds great, but what if I'm acting out or sleeping in class or getting under my desk and growling at the teacher because I'm trying to escape or avoid an assignment or a task or a content area that I'm not comfortable with? What if I'm in my state, this one doesn't, but what if I'm in a state that requires in public speaking class for all students in order to be able to graduate, and I am deathly afraid of speaking in front of other people? And so whenever I turn to speak, I either act out or I withdraw or I sit under my desk or whatever, and I refuse to speak. I refuse to interact. You can't help me to avoid that. Just like if I have a fear of math, if I hate math, or if I failed in math over and over and over again, and now I have a deep-seated aversion to math. And so whenever it's time for me to do math, independent work in math, I display inappropriate behavior in order to avoid math. You can't help me to avoid math. You can't teach me a better way to avoid math because it's kind of required. Interacting with other people, it's something that we're going to have to do in our world. So in that case, I'm not giving you a replacement behavior to help you to avoid it. Instead, I'm giving you strategies and techniques to help you to be able to cope with that which causes you anxiety, with that which frustrates you, that which you're afraid of. So I'm going to work with you in order to maybe do all right, if you do this much of the problem, then I'm going to give you a break. Or if you do at least this much, then I'm going to let you do something else that you prefer to do for a little while, and then we'll come back to it and work on some more. You're going to teach the child how to be able to approach it in small chunks, how to be able to calming techniques, self-talk, different ways that they can be able to then cope with something that they have to do that causes them great anxiety or fear, or just angst altogether. So replacement behavior, when we can, serves the same purpose. When it can't, then it's the coping strategies for how do I deal with that which I have to do that I'm not comfortable doing. So that replacement behavior is huge. This next section you can skip. And then this is the part, what would you do? Okay. Or what would you suggest? And this is not in the case study. This is for you to determine. So in your professional opinion, based on the information that's provided, based on what you decided as far as what you believe to be the function of behavior and what you believe should be the replacement behavior, what skills are needed for that student, for Winston, to be able to demonstrate that replacement behavior, whether it be communication, anger management, self-management systems, social skills, conflict resolution, generalization. What skills do we need, or does Winston need? And what direct instruction and practice opportunities should be provided for that student in order to teach them that replacement behavior? So that's what you're going to put here, is that who's going to be responsible, whether it's the special education teacher, the general education teacher, the school counselor, who is going to be responsible? What is it that they're going to be teaching about the replacement behaviors? There's certain parts of it, it's different parts of it. Are you breaking it down into coping strategies as well as for actual strategies the child will be able to put into place on their own, ways for the child to interact? How frequently is this instruction going to take place? How long is each session going to take place? Is it happening in the classroom? Is it happening in special ed classroom, gen ed classroom, in the guidance office, the behavior consultant's office? Where is this instruction taking place? Student's name again on the next page, and then reinforcement strategies. So this is the reinforcement. So what is it that is going to be provided for Winston when he's displaying the behavior that we've asked him to display? What student reinforcement preference assessment, inventory, or interview was used, and what were the results? So in this situation, you could say that we provided a forced choice reinforcement survey and determined that Winston likes XYZ. What type of reinforcer? We mentioned the favorite type of candy he likes. We also mentioned the fact that he loves attention from the teacher. So you can then choose what type of reinforcer you feel that would be most appropriate for Winston. All right, so it says here at the top in parentheses for you, this section should be your suggestions based on what you have and based on what we've learned in class. The next section would be reactive strategies. Again, what correction procedures and or consequences will be used when the target behavior occurs? So when that inappropriate behavior is still occurring, what should the consequences be? What feedback will be provided to remind the student to use the replacement behavior? So in other words, what type of prompting are we going to provide in order to be able to help Winston get back on track? We're kind of getting off track there. What are we going to do? Is it going to be a verbal reminder? Is it going to be a visual cue? Is it going to be some other kind of signal for that child? And if it's a verbal cue, what exactly is being said? So what is that feedback to try to bring him back to where we need him to be before we get too far? Again, student's name, communication provisions. How will we communicate amongst the staff as far as reviewing the plan and communicating regarding the progress of the plan, how we've collected our ongoing data? What is our progress monitoring going to look like? How often am I going to collect data? What type of data am I collecting? Am I going to be putting it in a graph? Am I going to be sharing it with the parents we use Google Forms with our teachers often in my building for collecting data as far as students' behavior plans. We'll create a Google form, and we often will send the link to the Google form through Outlook calendar. And that way, by sending it as a reminder, it's like, for example, on Fridays at 2:00, they'll get a ding on their Outlook calendar to remind them that it's time for them to be able to fill in the child's Google form. Sometimes we actually share that Google form also with the parent. So that way they get real-time information. Every time the teacher inputs something, that parent has access to it. By law, the behavior plan needs to be reviewed frequently, minimum 4 to 6 weeks. So we need to have ongoing review. The FBA and BIP is not something that we complete once and put it in a notebook and check it off and say, hey, we did that. It needs to be implemented with fidelity, which means that we need to make sure that we're following the behavior intervention plan. Everyone who interacts with that child, every teacher, every adult in the building that's interacting with that child, that they're following their plan, his plan, and that we're collecting the data as we stated in the plan, that data is being reviewed, and that we're coming together as a team. Like I said, this is not an event that should be done in isolation. This should be a team effort. So we're coming together as a team to be able to say, this is working, this is not working, this part of the plan is working, this part of the plan needs to be tweaked. the whole thing needs to be thrown out and started over. We need to come together every 4 to 6 weeks to determine his progress, to make sure that we're on track and that we're making an acceptable rate of improvement. And if not, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to change? What are we going to do differently if we're not seeing the progress that we should be seeing? And it could be a matter of that, okay, well, we've been implementing this for about 1.5 years now, just a arbitrary date. And the child's doing great. We don't feel that he no longer needs the plan. That has to be decided in an IEP meeting. And then on the IEP, there should be a place for you to actually mark whether the child has an FBA and behavior intervention plan, or if they no longer have a behavior intervention plan. If it's going to be addressed just through goals and objectives, if it's going to be addressed, if it's no longer a concern. So there is a place on the IEP where you indicate if behavior is a concern, and if so, how it's being addressed. So the IEP, the BIP, and the FBA become a part of that IEP for that child. So just like we had a summary for the FBA, we'll also have one for the BIP. But first, like I mentioned, we've got to have the monitoring of behavior plan. In this section, I'm listing the data that I have that was provided for you in your case study. You're going to skip the progress analysis because we don't have that at this point. That would be the ongoing information that you have to determine the review dates. You see there where it has the review dates every time we've met to review it. So for now, you would be skipping that part. And then here's our summary plan. So you're going to list again all of the information at the top. We're going to list the function of behavior, the replacement behavior. What do we do when the replacement behavior occurs? So in other words, what is the reinforcement? What do we do when the problem behavior occurs? So what are those consequences? And then explaining what the data is that's going to be collected. So what you see here is there's 50 answers. So on this one, each one is worth 1 point. So your FBA was worth 50 points. Your BIP is worth 50 points. The final part of your project, because this assignment is worth this assignment has 3 components. The final part is your presentation. So in a typical situation, once we got parent permission to conduct an FBA, which, like I said, in the real world, we would have to do. So once we've got parent permission and we've conducted all the parts of our FBA and we've written up as a team, written up our draft FBA and written up written up the FBA and written up a draft behavior intervention plan, we would come together in an IEP meeting. And in that IEP meeting, you as a special education teacher, you are the person who's in charge, would then present the information to that team about what you found, about your assessment results, about the patterns that we're seeing, the trends in behavior, the locations that is typically occurring, and what you believe to be the function of behavior. You would present that in an IEP meeting. So for our purposes, I'm your IEP meeting. So you're going to present that to me in a video. You're going to create a video where you present the information from your FBA and BIP. The video must be 5 to 10 minutes long. That's it. 5 to 10 minutes. Points will be deducted for every minute under 5 or for every minute over 10. All right. We're looking for 5 to 10 minutes. Why so specific? Think about when you have an actual IEP meeting. So you've got the parent taking off of work. You're pulling teachers out of the classroom. You're pulling admin out of the rest of the building. We have a set amount of time. And so we need to work on making sure that we can keep our communication succinct and on topic and being able to communicate what needs to be communicated in a set amount of time. Not to the point of saying, well, the parent, you're only worth 10 minutes of my time, but in making sure that we are respectful of the parent's time as well as everyone else's time. And often, at least at the high school level, the child is involved in these meetings as well. And because the child is involved in this meeting, we also want to be cognizant of the amount of time we're pulling them out of instruction as well. So I'm asking that your presentation be between 5 to 10 minutes. 5 to 10 minutes. So in our Dropbox for this assignment, you will be one submission, 3 files. So you will, one submission, 2 files, and a link. So you will upload your completed FBA template. You will upload your completed BIP template, and then you will give me the link to your video. The link to the video can either be posted just in the communication box for the assignment, or you can upload a Word document with the link in it. Make sure that the link to your video is not something that requires permission. You've already had practice doing this, of being able to display and show a template at the same time. That's why I gave it to you for your very first assignment for our class, for your week 1 discussion board. So that way you've had a few weeks to be able to practice it. You were introduced to it. Very first assignment for the course. So I want to be able to see your presentation. I want to be able to see you present it so I can see your presentation skills. And then I want to be able to see the document displayed as well. So that way I can see the information on the screen as you discuss it. So you will upload the link to your video. Like I said, make sure that it is not set where I have to have permission to be able to open it and view it. So the Dropbox on iLearn, let me go back here. Move this out of my way. Oh, sugar bears. Where I've got it minimized, it is not showing the way that it normally shows for me. So it takes me a second to navigate it. So under content, and if I scroll down, you'll see the Dropbox for FBA. Right now it's hidden because I didn't want it open until after you were able to see this video. But so you will open that Dropbox, and in that Dropbox, that's where you will upload your FBA completed, your completed BIP, and then the link for your video. So for your presentation is also worth 50 points. So this project counts as your signature assessment for our course. You know, every graduate course at UC has a signature assessment. This one counts for our signature assessment. It's worth 150 points. And FBA is 50 points, BIP is 50 points, and your presentation is 50 points. So for your presentation, this is a rubric, which you'll find in your rubrics folder, as well as in the FBA folder. So for your introduction, you're going to tell me about the student. You're going to tell me about Winston. You're going to address key factors, including but not limited to preferred learning style, important individuals in the child's life, the areas in which the child is successful, situations where the behaviors are worse, areas in which the child struggles. You're going to talk about what you believe to be the function of behavior. Remember, we're looking through the singular lens of ABA, applied behavior analysis. You're going to provide the suggestions of strategies to help lessen the undesirable behaviors. You're going to discuss the plan for how you would communicate the behavior plan. The student's progress with other staff members, the student, and the guardians. All that information was in your assignment. You're going to discuss how you would go about collecting the data, addressing how you will know if the plan is working. What are you looking for in the data? You're going to, when you're delivering your presentation, make sure that you're speaking in a way, hopefully, that maintains the audience's attention, that you're going to speak professionally and clearly and concisely, communicate the information in a logical order, not just jumping around. And then presentation also, like I said, I want to be able to see you present. The speaker must be visible, not would like to be, not should be. The speaker must be visible throughout the presentation, as well as the completed FBA and BIP must be displayed while you are discussing that information. Do not complete or create a new PowerPoint to display. I want to be able to see the forms. In an IEP meeting, you would distribute copies of the FBA and BIP for the team members to be able to see. Just like in an IEP meeting, everyone at the table should be able to see a draft of the IEP. So granted, law requires that parents receive the draft in advance. Yes. However, when we're talking about it around the table, everyone there needs to be able to refer back to it as well. And since our table is virtual, I want to be able to see you, and I want to be able to see the plan. So that's why I've asked to be able to see you in the video, and why I want to be able to see the FBA and the BIP displayed as you discuss it. You can set it up however you want to. Like I said, I did my screen here, split screen. And then I had all of my multiple tabs open, so that way I could go from one to the next as I discussed it. As far as for our assignment, you will notice that on our calendar that this is presented. If I can make this bigger. So you will see under week 5 where it tells you what is due for next week. So on our calendar, remember that it always lists, first column is the course week, what week it is of the course. Next one's the topics that we're discussing, and then the assignments and due dates. So under week 5, you will see that we're discussing in class chapters 8 and 9. And it will tell you that for next week, your functional behavior assessment, it says use provided template, refer to the video, PowerPoint, and rubric. Behavior intervention plan, use provided template, refer to the video, PowerPoint, and rubric. Video presentation, FBA, BIP, refer to the video, PowerPoint, rubric. There is no discussion board. So it tells you that all of those things that make up this assignment are due by week 6. So if there are any questions, you guys, please feel free to contact me. You know how best way to reach me is through text, but you can email me or call me if you would like to. Hopefully this video covered the information that you needed and explains to you exactly what it is that you need to do. And like I said, in a normal semester, you would have gone into a classroom. We've been a little far from normal for a while now. So like I said, for our purposes, your assignment is to be based on the provided case study about Winston. I will not accept an FBA that was based on a student that you've had in class before, or a student who you currently have in class, or an FBA that you participated in, or an FBA that you got from somebody else. For our purposes, for our class for this semester, it will be an FBA based on this case study provided for you about Winston J. Freeman. If you've got questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I will say I will see you soon. See you in class. Take care. God bless. And goodbye still works with good hello. See you guys soon. Bye.